Good afternoon. So in addition for being a teacher, I think of myself as a painter and a printmaker. Painting is kind of immediate. You see what you have on the canvas and you can communicate with it. That does not make it any less challenging. However, printmaking takes a little bit more to get it figured out. You can have your matrix or your plate ready. You have to ink it. In some processes, you have to submerge your paper in water for a certain amount of time, and then all of that, the inked plate and the paper, has to go under pressure in a printing press to get the image out. You may think you got it all figured out, and then you see your print, and it's probably over-inked or under-inked, and it takes some calibration to get it just right. That's what I love about printmaking. It asks you to calibrate every part of the process and to actually pay attention. It involves chemistry, mechanical engineering, and a lot of creativity. It was developed in China over 2,000 years ago, and it was printed by hand. And then in the 15th century, Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press, which allowed us in the first year of its invention to have two amazing things printed, a deck of cards and the Bible. When we think about a printing plate, it looks almost like a stamp. So the raised parts will print, you roll ink over it, goes over the press, and then you get your image. Because of the mechanics of it, I thought it would be amazing to introduce it to our students at Rose-Hulman. And for that reason, I also spent 9 months working with 4 mechanical engineering students to build me a printing press that would basically be used to teach printmaking classes in the spring of 2020. They went to Indiana State University, learned what printmaking was about, and they made this beautiful press, and I was so ready to teach printmaking in March 2020. We all know what happened. The pandemic started, and I had to think on my feet, and I had to make a home of uncertainty, which apparently I'm really comfortable with, because the studio practice asks us to be uncertain and okay with it every step of the way. And so my options were, now that this traditional approach is not going to work, what do I do? Well, creativity also asks us to make the most out of what we have and to think about resources differently. I teach at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. We have access to a lot of resources. And so, one of the first things I did was to switch up the way I think about printmaking. I asked myself, if this was an artwork, this problem of the pandemic, how would I approach it? My students are now all over the country. How are they going to experience printmaking in a way that is meaningful? Well, I could not ship blocks to them with cutting tools that they're probably going to cut themselves on 10 times a day. I would have had to ship a whole lot of Band-Aids with that. And I had to think about the resources we have here. So instead, I had them 3D design their own printing blocks. And we had them 3D printed here on campus. In order to do so, they taught me how to 3D design. I gotta tell you right now, SolidWorks is not fun. So I was terrible at it, but I stuck with it because I thought, well, I am now being introduced to something uncomfortable just like they are. I have to stay with it and figure out the answer. And so at the end, once they had all of their blocks printed, I had all of these boxes ready to ship to over 18 states in the country. When the students received them, they had all the instructions along with videos uploaded online to teach them how to print by hand, which is the most ancient way of printing, developed in China over 2,200 years ago, to print with a wooden spoon, using a block, using the highest technology we have today. They sent me pictures of their processes. They sent me pictures and videos of them working. We met online 16 to 20 hours every single week for 10 weeks straight. And it was exhilarating. It is still today one of the finest teaching experiences I've had. And of course, they sent me their working spaces. So this is the printing blocks that we had. And of course, we had to figure out a lot of problems. The filament on the 3D printed block repels water-based inks. Well, what are we going to do about that? I didn't know. I experiment with sanding it, with putting water-based inks on it to let it dry, and maybe then it will receive the ink. None of that worked, and then nail polish worked. I don't know how. I have experimented with 20 different things to get that right, and I got it right. And so, they sent me the works they did. We experimented with geometry for our first block. We talked about balance in a composition. We talked about mark making. We talked about exploring themes based in geometry, but go out to nature. So the red print is called or titled Scaredy Cat. And the other one is called A Heart, created by a student who graduated from physics, but is now an MFA student at Indiana State University getting her painting and printmaking degree. So I managed to change the fate of one engineer. I'll take that any day. And so it was really beautiful seeing all of these results. However, I was still not satisfied because I wanted them to do more. I wanted them to know what a printing press feels like. And I wanted them to know what it feels like to tune in and calibrate. So I had to think on my feet again. And after a lot of research, I found an incredible project called the Open Press Project that 3D prints printing presses. These adorable little presses, you can actually make prints out of them. That's what we did. I ordered enough for every single one of my students. And when I got the kit, it was not put together. And so, of course, the mean teacher I am, I didn't put it together for my students. I sent them the box as is. And I said, you're an engineering student, figure it out. And in the process, let me know how long it takes you. I got reports back saying 15 minutes to 20 to 2 hours. And in my head, I'm thinking, it took me 3 minutes, so somehow I win. I don't know what I was winning. I just felt like my competitive side was taken over. And of course, I had to tell them that. So for this particular process, instead of going with geometry, I wanted us to experiment a little bit more with floral designs where they have to calibrate to 2 different blocks instead of 1. So they have to register and kind of make sure that both blocks line up perfectly on paper. And here's the result of their work. Again, at this point, we are still meeting on daily basis. And they're still doing research and writing a whole lot and doing artwork analysis of other printmakers, researching the history of printmaking. And I'm trying to get them to get the most out of this experience because to me, printmaking presses and the printmaking process is absolutely sexy and beautiful. And for us to tune into a machine and to bring the best out of ourselves along with that machine is one of the most thrilling experiences I can have as an artist. And if I can actually channel that and give it to my students, that's even better. All of these works hang today in the hallway of my department, humanities, social sciences, and the arts. They hang as a reminder, a beautiful reminder of what happens when we linger in the question for a little while longer. What happens when we wait for the discoveries that can happen when we live in uncertainty. And when we are okay with not knowing. A lot of our students are not okay with not knowing, which is why we teach art at an institute like Rose-Hulman. It is also a reminder of a lesson about the depth of generosity that we have to offer to each other under pressure. What I learned from my students was amazing. Their patience with me, the resources and the generosity of my institute was absolutely transformative. And the last thing I have learned from this incredible experience is something that art teaches me every single day: to trust the process. Trust the process, and lovingly and patiently witness the expansion of ourselves on the other end. Thank you.